Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Jackie Ma, and this is a spiritual platform for thought leaders to come together and share all about the nuances of legacy. We bring the lexicon for the future now. Today, I'm joined by the beloved Jody Cursio, and she is here to talk all things ancestors. And I'm just going to read a little bit of her bio. She's a professional genealogist, a certified health coach and life coach, Reiki practitioner, leader, all the good things. And she creates bridges between academic standards, scientific principles, and spiritual practices, amongst many other things. Jody, it is a joy to have you on. Thank you so much for coming and spending your time with us today.
Thank you for asking me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. So I'd like to start by saying that it's incredibly auspicious, obviously, the timeline that we've chosen. So for those of you that don't know, obviously we're just coming off the cusp of Halloween, Samhain, and today is actually a fest in Italy, in Sicily. It is known as the Festa di Morti, and it is a day where people come together and they listen to the dead and they receive gifts. Children receive gifts from the ancestors. There's a whole lot of beauty in all cultures. I just brought that in because obviously I'm a paisan. Um, but without further ado, let's bring you in. Jody, tell me something. How are you? What's going on? Tell me about where you are right now.
Oh my goodness. And what you just said about today being a special day, just resonated in my body. It's like the ancestors were like, ooh, and they're appreciating that recognition because we both have Italian heritage, or at
Yes.
least partially Italian.
Yes.
And they're grateful that we're acknowledging it.
Mm.
So where I'm at right now, I'm still doing a lot of different things. I'm multi-passionate as an entrepreneur, and I've been focusing on traditional and genetic genealogy for the last couple of years.
Mm.
And now I'm sort of layering and folding that into some of the more spiritual, esoteric practices. And I think there's a place for both of those. I don't think they need to be mutually exclusive. And so
I
that's
think
sort of a deep dive. And there are some people that are maybe not ready for that or comfortable with it. So for those, I will do the tried and true and the traditional. And for others who are more open, we explore their genealogy and their ancestral lineage with a little more depth, a little more spirit, a little more expansion.
It's beautiful, really beautiful. I want to lean into that. So first, I always have come from the spirit end of things,
Mhm.
fully esoteric. That's how we met. And so that house is so powerful, but we do need to bridge it. I find that it kind of sells things short when you just are on one end of the spectrum. So bringing the full awareness of like the physicality of what they actually did because they were humans. It makes them less spirit and more real and gives us a little bit more of a sense of culture, a sense of who we are and like hardship and what it took to even bring our bodies here. So,
Yes,
yeah, I
absolutely.
would love to hear. And I found it not to be very easy. Like the ancestors came through spiritually to help me with the research I was doing. So that was really, it's also exciting. It's like, as I'm want to hear how it is for you. It's incredibly exciting to start like pulling data and things sometimes are not available. And then it's like at the right time, spirit allows them to become available. And then more data and more reports and another marriage certificate pops in. And things start to form and you start to see more of a cohesive picture.
Absolutely.
Tell me.
So, there's my personal journey, and then there's the journeys that I'm leading clients on. Um, and I do things a little bit differently as a professional genealogist, and that a lot of pros that take clients will get the information, make an analysis of what they're starting with, get a contract and move forward, do the research, write up the report, and then send it to the client. End of story. Or sometimes there's more work based on recommendations, and then they go forward again and again. And that's sort of the traditional form. And I decided I wanted to actually hold their hand
Mm.
and bring them on the journey and give them peeks into the process and where we are in finding information. And so more of a collaborative effort in a bit of a way so that they're a part of the process. I think a lot of people, want to get their ancestry done and they start and then they get overwhelmed or lost or aren't sure, or they don't have a lot of time. And so they hire a professional genealogist. And then they lose out on making these connections and discoveries along the way. And so they're really removed from that process. And I think by drawing them in various ways along the way, so that's not just here's a report in your email that you get, not that that's bad, but so that they feel more a part of it. And I honestly think, yeah, the ancestors like that too, right? It just, they
Absolutely.
come to life. And you're right, there is an excitement. It's like a treasure hunt,
It
right?
totally is like a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
It's like there's a new hint
Yeah,
that you
it's a
get an
dopamine
email
hit
and
in your brain. I mean, it's legitimate. It's like,
yeah.
oh, there's that. And a lot of hobbyists and amateurs, they go down that rabbit trail. Ooh, this, ooh, that. And then they don't write down like where they went, how they got there. They
Mm.
forget to capture that piece of information. And then they're like, oh my God, I know I found this. Where did it go? So, a pro genealogist can help them learn how to assemble that information in a meaningful way.
Oh, it's so powerful. I want to touch in when you and I were speaking prior to this call, we both understand that this is kind of a calling for people. Maybe not so much for the people. Well, that's not true. There is a calling. If anyone is searching and doing any sort of research on their ancestry, there is naturally a curiosity, and somebody is tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, handle this, get to it. And I love when we were talking, it's so true. There is normally a designated person in the family that takes up the art of reconvening, bringing together, reweaving the tree of the ancestry. And obviously, both you and I are role players in our families in this way. What
Yeah.
an honor! Oh,
Yeah.
it makes me want to cry. It's an honor to do this.
It is. And, it gives me joy not to just do it for myself and my
Yeah.
immediate and slightly distant family, but even for strangers, right?
Oh, totally.
There are a couple of cases where I've found out, we are connected generationally in the past, right?
Mm,
Our families lived in the same town, or
yes.
or they played, and not only were they from the same town, but they played baseball together. So do you find out these little interesting tidbits? And I honestly think that goes for everybody sort of in our inner circle. Um, or have come, maybe they are people that were with us for a period of time and they're no longer in our present day. But it seems to me that those circles carry through the generations.
Mm.
Um, so I don't know, it's can't prove it yet, but it seems I've run into these things along the way.
I totally agree with you. And I'm going to share a little funny, interesting story. So, um, I have a landlord from maybe 15 years ago who come to find out. So she was Calabrese. She was my landlord and I didn't know much about her. And come to find out, so she ended up being my mother's realtor. And now we just came to find out that she's our fourth cousin. So it's so
Yes.
funny how this weave is
Yep.
obviously it's a spiritual weave, but the way our
Right.
families, the way we're brought together. I mean, when
Mhm.
she wrote to me and she's like, "You're not going to believe this," and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Look," and she sent me the message from 23andMe, and I was like, oh, "Interesting."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not surprising though, like at all.
It is and it's not, right? And so the more that we are connected in that spiritual way to these
Mhm.
coincidences, serendipitous events, um, we can see the meaning behind it. Other people may not, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, more statistical. What are the odds,
Yeah.
right? So I'll run the numbers and find out, yeah, well, you have a one in a, 899,000 chance of having a fourth cousin with somebody you're doing business with. Either way, I still think there's meaning behind it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have a maybe not so random question. You might get this from time to time, but as somebody who's very protective over my blood and who doesn't like to give samples of DNA or, giving my saliva, for example. Do we have much data on whether or not when we do these tests, which I have participated, where this data is going?
Depends where you test.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So, I mean, you would have to read each testing company's terms and conditions, right, on
Okay.
the legal side to find out what they are legally committed to, obligated to, and
Mm,
can and cannot do, right? So
okay.
there's that part of it. Um, I know that, and then also what they do with your DNA sample
Yep.
after they've used it. There are different, uh, some keep it for a certain period of time and then, they're all disposed of. Some keep them indefinitely. So there's that aspect. More concern came up when one company sold them. It was Ancestry, sold their company, right? So now what's going to happen? And
Mm,
there, I think in 23andMe, if I remember correctly, they are involved with research. So although the data is, so your data is there, but then it's randomized so that it's not Jackie, it's not Jody, but this collective of all these individuals of unnamed, unidentified persons, and then they use that for some of their genetic testing and uh, the different like health measurements that they now offer, right? So that comes from the collective use of that data, just not you individually being recognized. So
mm.
I don't see as much risk with that. Um, yeah. So the data is kept in, like all of our data, right, in the cloud somewhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
likely, and on servers and backup servers. And I personally decided not to worry too much about it. They haven't really perfected a way to clone people, to our knowledge, so I'm not worried about them turning my saliva into another mini version of me.
Yeah.
Um, but more people are actually concerned with certain third-party applications.
Mm,
There's one in particular, GEDmatch. And that was, I don't know if you remember hearing about it a few years ago about using it for criminal and police data
I
mining.
have
And so,
heard. Yeah.
right. So now there is they tell you what it can and cannot be used for. You can elect in or out if don't want to be shared that way. um, there's always a risk, right? There's always a
Mhm.
risk that something can get leaked, misused. So recognize what those possibilities are and proceed. For people who are concerned about having that out there, there is now private DNA testing in cases of paternity, right? If you or sibling, you
Okay.
want to find out you're related to somebody, but you don't want to do it through Ancestry and make it public. I think it's Para, I think it's Paragon, that you can now purchase a test kit through them. You and your suspected, like if you want to find out if you and a half brother are actually full brother and
Mhm.
sister, you can do that like in a separate and apart from being in a database. But
Wow.
for people who are looking for cousins and more information or their health traits, that's going to need to be in the collective where they can match it with other data.
Got it. Thank you for that. Yeah, I find it all really fascinating, obviously, because we're in such a vast technological age. But what I find so interesting is one is I do truly believe that there's a calling from the ancestors to deepen into our relationships and heal these family lineages and do all of that. And it is just so happened to be happening right on par with, the the onslaught of data and what's available technologically. So it's a way for people to be market use tested and to further probably the medical industrialized complex at some level to put us into boxes as far as who's sick and what's going on and that whole thing. And also bringing us closer to the roots, to the bones, to remember.
Yeah, and it's interesting since you brought up the medical. The one thing I will say that I think some good can come out of it is
Mm,
there's a lot of things we know about illnesses that are physical, that have certain characteristics that are traits, and how our body reacts to certain
Mhm.
medications, and or even things like birth defects,
Yeah.
learning disabilities. And so there is a use for it. I did mine originally for health purposes, actually, not for looking for ancestors, 10, 12 years ago, maybe 12. And because I had a number of chronic challenges, and it turned out, I have some things that react with one another, and I wouldn't have known that. And so it was good information to have. And I I think it will lead to eventually personalized medicine.
Mm.
And I think that will really be beneficial for people. So for people that have the physical and maybe mental challenges where medication is appropriate, it would be specific for them, not just, well, let's try this one first. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this one. So I think there's
That's
some benefit to that.
that's a really positive spin. Thank you for bringing that in. I really
Sure.
appreciate that. Yeah, it's important to have the full spectrum. And that's why these conversations I think are so great because it's like one piece and then another piece and they need to be brought together. It's how we bring a more cohesive understanding. Yeah,
But I
absolutely.
do also agree with there is a calling. And I have seen where one person for like even one generation, one branch of the family is the person. And most people who embark on genealogy, it's not a, oh, it's nice. It's a, oh my gosh, I can't do enough of it. It is um in their bones. It is just
Yeah.
it, and they seem to be led to the places they need to go. Um, it's not just, I don't think, random.
This feels really good to have this conversation with you too, because although doing it for myself, I have zero interest in doing it with clients. My work is to bring them home into relationship and to heal.
Mhm.
So that's my leg of it. So I'm happy to refer you now.
Oh,
And so, yeah,
yeah,
so I'm like, oh, this is great. This actually gives them the other spectrum and the other piece so that that angle can come in because it's not a strong suit for me. It's a little bit agony. I'm like, guys, you better, work through me because this is a lot of paperwork. So I'm glad that, yeah, it's really important actually that you're bringing this work.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm glad to be able to do it. And if for us, I'm also working on my own still. I'm working on my
Yeah.
husband's. And I do believe, in the ancestral healing industry,
Hmm.
um, there are different methods, right? Different ways, different camps on access and protocol, and whether you do journeying or even just send Reiki energy up the
Hmm.
ancestral line, working with the healthy ancestors. And I think there's room for all of it, sort of like religion, right? You
Yeah.
can be a Protestant, a Catholic, of Jewish faith. There's not just a one size fits all. I do think being aware of what you're doing, or if you're working with a practitioner, knowing what they're doing and having trust and confidence in that.
Hmm.
Um, because you want to make sure that they're using proper protocols if you're
Yeah.
dealing with the spiritual realm, right?
Absolutely. You want to know that the person that's able to hold that space can see what is healthy, what is not healthy, is able to read the scene and facilitate something that is safe and yeah, and on
Exactly.
board.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not like a novice endeavor, but I mean, you can definitely pray, you can definitely meditate on it, you can definitely invite in, healthy ancestors when you go on doing research. It doesn't have to be a big ceremony, but when you're talking about the actual healing up the ancestral line, um, time space continuum, I think that's what needs to be um, done carefully and with intention and thought.
I absolutely agree with you. And there is, as you mentioned, there's so many ways to do it and it's very nuanced. And
Mhm.
we will fluctuate over time in what's needed. for
Mhm.
each one of our lineages, right? So it might be first doing the repair and building the relationship, and then it could be, you know, working with higher consciousness of the ancestors and releasing and healing DNA and all the things. It
Yeah.
is very full, and
Yeah.
I keep
And I do.
watching. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, so even at a personal level, there's a lot of discussion about, trauma, right?
Mhm.
Family constellation trauma is, that science is now saying, trauma is basically those experiences that ancestors had are encoded now in your DNA, right? So this isn't just woo-woo speak. This is like there are real world effects from those traumas that they experienced. Sometimes it breeds resilience, sometimes it makes sensitive areas in the individual,
Mhm.
and approaching things even by just doing breath work. Different trauma release therapies can be very helpful, even if you're not deliberately doing it like to go up the ancestral line. It's still
Oh,
helping the DNA within your body not proceed down to future generations.
absolutely. We are living ancestors. So since we're connected to that chain, every single thing that we do is actually in relationship to that.
Yes.
So it's just whether or not you are specifically choosing and consciously going to work in those realms, but every human that shows up to care about themselves and to heal and do their own deep work, it is impacting everybody, not even just the ancestors, but all beings in our
Yes.
that we relate with in our communities. I think
Exactly. That
it's
energy expands outward.
yeah, and it makes everybody so valuable then. Like every human is so precious and valuable in who just being who they are because it
Yeah.
impacts so many people.
Yes. Well, and if you look at the statistics of, going back, let's say 1,000 years, your ancestral chain, the fact that you are here today is a miracle when you look at everything
Absolutely.
that's transpired.
Absolutely. And yeah, I love that. And I do really like too that you bring the bridge because part of me is like, I don't need science to prove to me what generations and generations of beings, what we've already known. But now they are proving a lot of the things. So they're late to the table. I just want to be clear about that. That society
Yeah,
is late to the table for what the wisdom of our human bodies and our higher intelligence has known all along, which we now refer to it sometimes as woo woo, but actually it's the woo wisdom.
there you go. There you
I
go.
want to label that. It's the woo wisdom.
Well,
And
wisdom. I like it.
yeah, so it's always been here. And now the masses, because of the testing and the work they're doing, are now starting to understand what the ancient ancestors and us are remembering that we already know.
Absolutely. And it's interesting with the DNA because, in genealogy, DNA work is relatively new, within the last 10 years. And there are still genealogists that don't want to get involved, like the science part, they're just not interested in it, or they feel it's a lot to learn to do it correctly, or they get
Mhm.
so far and then it's like, okay, this is good. I need an expert to go further, especially if they're looking, if you're dealing with like a adoption case,
Mhm.
things of that nature. But it's often said we have a genealogy family, meaning our family of knowledge that we're aware of, and then we have a genetic family. And sometimes we are in this life with our, document what looks to be documented or undocumented genealogy family that we've built the tree around that we can ascertain. But there's oftentimes foundlings or misattributed parentage. And so DNA has disrupted some family secrets, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes that knowledge may seem harmful versus helpful. And uh, I look at it as, each person has to make that choice. If something is uncovered that doesn't meet with what their prior knowledge is, do they want to know? Each
Mhm.
person needs to make that choice for themselves. Um, that said, discovering truths can sometimes be, although painful, they can be also unburdening.
Oh,
For some
absolutely.
people that didn't know they were adopted, it's like, now I get it. I never felt connected to this person. I felt I
Mhm.
don't fit into this family. It's sort of that reaffirmation. And and sometimes it's not even about building a relationship with their biological family that they didn't know. It's just that knowing and or curiosity or where's my home? Well, my home is with my adopted people. This is my family here on earth, but these are the people, this is my genetic lineage. And it's good to know that, oh, I've got Scottish ancestors that I didn't know about. And making that connection, but not having to dwell in it on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm. I think that's really profound what you're saying. There are family secrets, and I believe that the ancestors are leading us to open those secrets. It's like pockets of repression, and it causes sickness, and everybody wants to be liberated.
Yes. And in some cases, there's some traumas that of how, children were conceived, right?
Yes.
We know that there were some unfortunate situations. And it's not that there should be shame or pain in uncovering that, but in knowing that certain choices were made because of that. It
Mm.
had nothing to do with the innocent, right?
Yeah.
And that in itself can be very comforting and bring peace.
I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but I feel like asking this. It's just coming up right now. Is there a highlighted marker? Can you tell when somebody was a product of incest? Like, is that yeah, that's basically the question. Like, is there something that
So
highlights?
So not on the surface, it's not like, ooh, incest. No,
Yeah.
what you would know is in looking at the DNA, depending on how recent it is. We right now only go back on autosomal DNA, which is like your ancestry or your 23andMe test. That only goes about six on the low side, 8 on the high side generations. Okay, so if it's something that happened beyond that, we don't yet have the technology to really look at those connections. Y-DNA is a little bit different, and uh, mitochondrial DNA is a little bit different. That goes back to more ancient origins. So what you will find out is in doing the research that you're a much perhaps closer match to somebody who you thought was an uncle
Mm,
than you are to your own father. Or, so it comes across in those ways.
mhm.
And genealogists, handle that very delicately. You don't just make that statement or
Yeah.
accusation. It's, well, these are the numbers. And okay, this is you and this is your brother if others have
Yeah.
tested and you can look at the numbers based on that and make
Mm,
some determinations.
interesting.
So you would
Mhm.
never really say it was incest.
Yeah,
Just say misattributed parentage.
got it. Ah, beautiful. And now, as far as ancestral, tell me a little bit about, actually, would you please say your full name, your ancestral name, and just call yourself into space 3 times, and then I'm going to do the same thing?
Um, so I was born Jody Greco, Jody Greco, Jody Greco.
Perfect. Okay. And I was born Jacqueline Hyacinth Rolandelli, Jacqueline Hyacinth Rolandelli, Jacqueline Hyacinth Rolandelli. Hmm. It's interesting, the power of the name. It changes our numerology, it changes a lot of things, but it is an offering and an honoring when we speak it in, because they're listening, they're with us. So
Absolutely.
it's
And
powerful.
and I love how some of the traditions of other cultures, women didn't change their names.
Hmm.
And when their children were born, they added in their maiden name actually before the surname of the male.
It's
So
beautiful.
yeah. Um, and that actually in genealogy, if you're not aware of the culture where you're doing research, can trip people up.
Mm.
So
That makes a lot of sense, because even in the records, when different family members were coming over from Italy, oftentimes women used their own names when they were coming over on the boats. And
absolutely.
so,
And by default, if they weren't traveling with the husband, the children also got ditto marked as having that last name.
yes, absolutely. So there's
Yeah.
so much there,
Yeah.
so much weaving. So tell me about your ancestry. Where are your people from?
So my father's side of the family is the Italian side,
Mhm.
and my let's kind of say actions. So his father and his so my father's father and grandparents came from a small mountaintop town in the Salerno province, called Sant'Angelo a Fasanella.
Mm,
Yeah, it's up in the Cilento. They have it's something called St. Michael's Grotto, and it's this
yeah.
beautiful underground cave, and
Mm.
it's just fascinating. I was so thrilled to have been able to travel and visit there and actually meet a long, long distance cousin.
Nice.
Um, and my father's mother comes from the Basilicata region, from Gersano. And then her father is we may there may be a misattributed parentage going on there.
Mhm.
So, but we think from possibly from Benevento area. So
Okay.
all southern Italy
Okay.
on my father's side. My mother's side was reported to be like most likely Pennsylvania Dutch, meaning really Germans that settled in Pennsylvania.
Got it.
And as it turns out, they really immigrated from the Netherlands and originally settled in upstate New York and then went to Pennsylvania. And I do not have genetic markers specific to Germany. It could be that they were there previous generations, but what we're finding is we have a lot of Scandinavian,
Mm.
which the further back you go, a lot of people have Scandinavian just because of the migration pattern. But it's not what we expected necessarily. And I have a lot of Scottish from my mom's side, a little Irish, and some English. So I'm a mutt.
Beautiful. Awesome. Like most of the world now.
Yeah.
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 It's funny when I got my results back, I was expecting to be like this exotic something. And I was like, oh, 98% Italian. Gee. Um,
But
and
you know, that's kind of rare.
is it?
Yeah. So my husband was at first when he got tested 99% Italian and 1% Middle Eastern or something.
Yeah.
I kick back to the way back. But have you looked at your results like recently? Have they
I
changed?
haven't. I should look at them again. And at some point in the future, I'll probably go with a different company because my guidance has told me, obviously, that it changes all the time. Not just what they're capable of, but our DNA is changing all the time. So more information will become accessible
Agree.
principally. So I maybe I'll take the you had mentioned a different test that had deeper lineage. What was that?
So there are two. As a woman, you can't take the Y-DNA test. So if you had a brother or uncle, they could do a Y-DNA test for your paternal line,
Okay.
surname line. But there's a mitochondrial test that women and men can take,
Mm,
but it's strictly for the mother line. So
love
feminine
that.
legacy,
Yes. I'm writing it
it's
down.
it's offered by what FTDNA, which is Family Tree DNA, is the testing company that does that test. There are not as in full disclosure, there's not as many, their database is not as large. So you're not going to have like the giant cousin matches that you do on Ancestry and 23andMe.
Mhm.
But sometimes people get things back and they're like, this makes no sense. I don't understand these other people that I match up with at certain degree,
Yeah.
closeness, have these last names that have nothing to do with mine. So it's a little more um advanced in figuring out what to do with it, but it's wonderful to have. And I always advise families to test the eldest member because you
Mhm.
can always go, you're back one more further generation.
That makes a
Um,
lot of sense.
yeah. So I always, yeah, male, female, whomever. And then things aren't as duplicative. So
Mhm.
you don't need to necessarily test beyond that. But in other situations, if you're trying, like if you had a grandfather, say that was a foundling, you would want to test you, brothers and siblings, and then first cousins, because the what you inherit is random,
Mhm.
most of
Yeah,
it, and so you will
absolutely.
get different matches than they will.
Isn't it
So, and your
fascinating?
DNA won't match exactly the same unless you're an identical twin.
It's incredible. Such a
Yeah.
mystery.
Yeah. It's fun to unlock it. It really is.
It is a lot of fun. So much to think about. Yeah, I'm going to consider doing that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Is there anything that you want to share that's come up for you in your own lineage work? I mean, these are relationships. So I know even for those of us that are work in the ancestral realms and, I teach and share, it's an evolving relationship and more it grows and we grow through the relationship. So it's very beautiful to acknowledge and step into that. But is there anything about you and your family that you have felt that really touched you or that you sense from that deepening in relationship with them?
I've noticed that more discoveries come about, even without really like doing a hard research on it. Um, and I also, and I don't know that everybody has this, but, and perhaps because I'm open to it, I seem to have different maybe experiences, or I attribute these experiences to things that have to do with my lineage.
Mm.
Um, I had an experience in Scotland in when we were in Edinburgh Castle, and some people might think they were having a panic attack. And I literally had like, I was overcome. I couldn't breathe.
Mhm.
Tears are streaming. It's like I wanted to claw my way out of this place. And I had no idea what was happening to me.
Yeah.
I've had panic attacks before, and that wasn't it. And I hadn't really researched my Scottish line. And in doing some research, I found out that my immigrant ancestor on that line actually was an indentured servant and was in the Battle of Culloden.
Mm.
I also found out that I think it's his mother, um, her name, whether it's her or not, we don't know, appeared in the Scottish Book of Witches that
Mm.
came out. So these things just like start to show up because
Yeah.
you're inviting them in, right? It's sort of the unmasking. My husband's had a few surprises. Most good, most of them good,
Yeah.
but it's it's um it's led more family to us that we've been, able to open arms and embrace and get to know. And our lives are so much richer for that. And I know a lot of people get very protective. It's like, who's this cousin contacting me? Why, and in the case where there was an adoptee, and a lot of people are afraid of that, what do they want from me? Why are they it's just about people finding out where they come from.
Yeah.
You can't speak for everyone, but 99% of the time, people just want to know how am I connected to the earth, the world?
Yeah.
And I want to embrace and be able to provide that for people,
Mm.
personally, when it's affected my own family. And I, I don't see the need to have this protective wall, and just, I don't think pretending that these things didn't occur
Yeah.
helps anybody.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. And I like how you just tied in the piece with the land, which is where I wanted to bring us next. This connection that we have with land, um, all of us, how powerful it can be when we step back onto ancestral land and what
Yeah.
that feels like viscerally. I know for me personally, going back to Italy and living there. I mean, as soon as I land on Italian soil, France too, but Italy's very strong. It's like I can hear my blood talk. It's like everything is pulsing, pulsing. There's like an electricity that I sense moving through the body, and I can feel them. They can feel me. There is something that is so powerful and plausible that happens within the body and its connection to the land itself. Like the memory ignites, and it is exquisite. Is there anything that you want to share about that?
Yes. So it's really interesting. And for the first time I went to Italy was back in 2015. So, not that long ago, really.
Mhm.
And and I was so excited to go. I had tried to go twice before. It never worked out. I was like a little kid. And we got off the plane and literally I knew where to go.
Mm.
I didn't need a map. And my husband's Italian, more Italian than me. And he's like looking at me like, how do you know this? And he'd been there before. And I wasn't afraid of being a tourist, with the whole hide your money and your thing. And I carried a handbag and I just didn't have that, it's like, I'm one of you. You're not going to bother me.
Yeah.
Um, and, and that was just even in Rome. And I felt amazing the entire time I was there.
Mm.
Like I here in the States, I am gluten free, dairy free. I have issues with that stuff. I went back there, I had croissants and cappuccinos and pasta. Didn't bother me at all. And it's how we raise
Yes.
our crops and manufacture product, and that has a lot to do with it. But also, I do believe that there's a cellular memory and there's a knowingness, knowing where to go, where not to go, what to do, what not to do, what looks sketchy, what doesn't. It's like your body gets into this rhythm of recognition and knowingness, and it's extremely powerful, and it's embodying
Yeah.
your past. And then when you get to go to the actual town that your ancestors are
Mhm.
from, is it's just crazy. And I couldn't speak. They speak dialect.
Mhm.
I didn't know their dialect. And I actually was speaking some Italian in other places that I really didn't know how to speak yet. Still don't.
Mhm.
It's on my list of things to do.
That's
But Google Translate works.
yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it really, and I still speak to the people I met in that town. We still communicate, on Facebook and occasional email. It's a connection that needed to be made because connections were lost.
Mm. I hear you about that. It's incredible. I am still friends with all of the friends when I lived in Italy. We're all on Facebook still. They are beautiful connections. And I know they're from this life and they're beyond. There's,
Yeah.
we're here visiting and we are vast bodies of peoples. But I agree with you. These connections are so profound, and the way that the body, the intelligence that the body opens up into in these spaces to guide and direct and support and strengthen.
Yeah.
When you were speaking, I felt when you were speaking about the foods, of course, yes, the manufacturing thing. And I just felt resiliency. Like when you're on the land, there's something that opens up and strengthens in the body. It's like it's an energy of resiliency that becomes more accessible and available.
Yeah.
Super powerful.
And it was
Mm.
interesting as we went, because we did go north. We went up to, Tuscany and Florence and Venice, and the further we got away from what I would consider like my central ancestral lineage area, we were fine in Basilicata. I felt fine. I noticed I felt less connected. I felt more affected by outside things.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think there is a difference between just going to visit anywhere in Italy and then going close to near your heritage.
Yeah,
I think there is a little bit of a difference there.
I hear you. For me, I also look at it as though I generally have not visited anywhere new, meaning that they are all ancestral foot grounds and also they're soul homes for me. So
Mhm.
wherever I travel, generally, it's just whether or not there's a strong memory impingement in my body that reconciles or recognizes the footing that I am accessing. And leading back to where you were speaking about Scotland and like having that powerful experiences, I've had a great many of those. And sometimes they're incredibly beautiful, like where you are so in ecstatic in joy and where you are reliving a rape or a trauma that feels like it's happening in real time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's irrelevant actually, but whether to discern whether or not it's ancestral or if it's another timeline, that's a vast nuance of topic,
Yeah,
but
there's yeah, that's a whole other
that's a
conversation.
whole other talk. But yeah, it's beautiful and big. And then watching how we just pass down memory and information, it's profound.
And keeping them present day, right? So the rituals that we can adapt and um, recognize and honor their them being here or
Yeah.
them getting us here actually. I mean, simple things, right? Simple things, setting a
Simple
place at the
things.
table,
Yeah.
meditating about it, or having a special day, lighting a candle on Sundays,
Yeah.
adopting some tradition or recipe that was important to them. um, that can make a huge difference in just keeping that connection going, keeping
Absolutely.
them present, and not just Christmas.
Yeah. Totally
Right.
agreed. Yeah. And also just not these like right now, like these what are considered heightened death days, just continuing to build a relationship throughout the year. And for those of us that are listening to this, it is, as Jody said, it is very simple to just light a candle and make a prayer for them, and just start to get into that space of communion.
Yeah.
There's many ways that one can go about doing ritual, but I also do highly recommend for those that are listening. um, well, we've got your tag team right here for those that are interested in doing the, the physical and the spiritual. Just there's a lot that is available, and you want to approach ancestry with respect and a lot of maturity, because it's humbling. There's a lot of that we come with that is actually them, but it's us. And so
Yeah.
I find that we really are called to mature when we're working with the ancestors. Yeah, our new modern ideas are very different from the constructs that they came from, and so it's beautiful and yeah,
Yeah. And I do think on the feminine side, I do believe that um they live through us, and they see and they cheer us on, and they want us to be able to do the things that they weren't able to, or even further back that they once were able to, that got taken away.
yeah.
And
Mm,
it's coming full circle now. So they're in our corner,
they are in our
cheering us
corner.
on.
I really love you saying that. Yeah, that brings us back, I think, to full circle that we really are all one. And everybody just wants to be free. And everybody, like all of us, we want to be connected. We want to be sourced. And I look forward to seeing what this time brings for you, for me, and for all of those that are called to deepen and heal the ancestral lineages. What is possible when that happens? What kind of world can we even dream in as far as tying it back into legacy? Like we are them, right? We are a legacy already. But what can it look like when the infrastructure has been levied and there's more light in the lineages and ancestors are now seated in their majestic high divine, their consciousness is higher, we're higher, like when everybody's operating from a new state of awareness, what's possible for our health, what's possible, speaking about mental illness, how can that shift? These secrets being brought from the dead up into life, having that be released and revealed. I mean, I would think we'll see a lot less cancer, actually.
I would
um,
agree.
so,
I, I
and happier wombs, much better womb health in women.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's big. I love that. Is there anything that you would like to tell our audience before we start to close out? Yes, how to reach you, but anything that you feel like sharing as imparting as a living ancestor?
Um, that if you're all interested in exploring, like, well, what would that be like, or what does that look like? Do some research, get online, um, you know, Google ancestral healing, kind of explore the different ways that that can happen, and choose something that resonates with you,
Mm,
or choose to work with somebody who you feel some connection to, not just because they've got this certification or because they wrote the book, or because they have a PhD. There are many knowledgeable people. They may not be the right people for you,
Mhm.
right? And so just do what resonates. And if it doesn't feel safe, don't do it. Or if it feels
Yeah.
off, don't do it. Look for something else.
I really appreciate that advice, and it's beautiful and sound. And I also just want to add that the person that you call in to support you in moving into relationship with your ancestors is a soul kinship. And that person is likely invested in in you and your people. And so it's very powerful when we look at things that way. I'm 100% about the certifications and the science. Those things are perks, right? But at the end of the day, it's, do you feel safe? Who are the right people? And ask your ancestors to send you those divine teachers, send you those people that are capable of holding and bringing you into right relationship with yourself and your heritage. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's gorgeous. Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. Tell the audience how they can get in touch with you as far as working with you and all the things.
Sure. My website is Modern Ancestrix, MODERN, ANCESTRIX. And I can be emailed at jody@modernancestrix.com. I was also a contributing author for a book that recently came out called The Ancestors Within, Volume 4. And there is also going to be an Ancestor Summit during the week of November 7th through 11th with replays available. So that's a lot of opportunity to kind of explore ancestor work and see what that's about.
That's beautiful. Thank you. We'll put all the details below so everybody can get in touch with you and participate. It does all sound like beautiful avenues of reconnection. So thank you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. And thank you to the ancestors for bringing you to us. It's we're all very fortunate. And to our audience, may this have brought you some form of honor for you to remember where you come from and to really just lean into legacy and lean into, wow, who am I and who are the people that came before me? And just do some contemplation for those that have not yet felt the call. You will definitely experience a beautiful opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
You're welcome.
Wonderful.
Welcome. All right. Till later, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.